Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and welcome to the final part of all the albums we covered this year for Nothing But Black Metal November. It's very exciting. Finally got all 60 done. It was a whole lot. A lot of good, some bad, some not even black metal, but I mean, those got DQ'd. So, what happened this year? Well, we had First for Horn. That happened. We had the anime riff chart, if any of you saw that. I only knew about the 3x3, but apparently that guy made a 4x4 towards the end of it. I never really saw that to its completion, but I heard those were good albums. I have no idea. There's also the Schizo Black Metal chart, which I wrote down plenty of those. So you guys will probably actually see a lot of those mentioned in upcoming years of Nothing But Black Metal November. But this is a momentous occasion. I've finished in, for me, a pretty timely amount of time, I guess. Normally this takes me forever, like with math rock. Jeez. But who cares? You know, it's done. Let's talk about what's good and let's talk about what's bad. But at least we're starting off with something quite great. And I mentioned this album previously. This is the infamous black metal band Silencer with their sole album Death Pierce Me. So obviously this is a landmark album, probably one of the most influential, especially in its little micro genre here, up there with like Xasthur and Shining. This is probably one of the biggest heavy hitters. And for a band with only one album, you know, it's quite an album. And yes, of course, most people think of this as sort of like the be all end all like depression album, but I actually think it's a lot more of a case of insanity to look through this thing because there's a whole lot more themes than just depression. There's themes of like hopelessness and mental decay. Very dark album overall. Like you can just look at this cover and it's like a guy looking at himself in a mirror and doesn't even recognize his own face. Pretty dark. Now, to get it out of the way, the vocals on this album, you either love them or you hate them. Or I guess like them or hate them, because not a lot of people love them, but they are similar to the DSBM style that you've seen before of like these high-pitched painful screams, except the way they sound, especially on the very first scream of the album, sounds kind of wimpy and kind of bizarre, honestly. I don't really know how else to describe it than that, but you definitely get more acclimated to that as the album goes on. You gotta, when you listen to this for the first time, you really have to like brace yourself for the first track and then just let it sink in over time and just kind of acknowledge it, because it makes more sense when you think about it in a different way other than just like a high-pitched like kind of girly scream. But it definitely feels more appropriate later on. And that's not the only type of sort of, I guess, scream, I guess, for the album. Like there are some more wretch black metal vocals which are actually really, really good. And I think there was like one other style I heard at one point, kind of more death growly, if I remember correctly. Not quite sure, but vocals are hit or miss for some people. Also, the instrumentals are utterly crushing. They're raw, but not too raw. They can be very percussive at the same time. And it's honestly very shocking how much variety there is here. Like, you think about bands like Make a Change, Kill Yourself, and they have these 20-minute grand songs that are very repetitive and so much you sink into them. And this one, instead, it's just like, it's mesmerizing, but it doesn't need to be repetitive to do so, which I have zero issue with bands having to be repetitive, especially if you make repetition succeed, because a lot of times repetitive means boring. Even black metal does that a lot. But here, it's not that repetitive. I mean, some of the riffs you hear, obviously, is sort of leitmotifs throughout the song, but it is just insane how moody this is. And the atmosphere is utterly amplified by sort of this cacophonous and cavernous style of production. Everything's like swarming around itself, and you really feel trapped. I could go on and on and on about how influential and amazing this album is, but I recommend you just listen to it yourself. Obviously not an entry-level black metal album here. It is certainly essential in terms of DSBM, like easily top 5 up there with Halmstad and half of Xasthur's output, and Leviathan's debut. People kind of forget that Leviathan's debut is DSBM, and they kind of just like, oh, that's a really good black metal album. But, I mean, those four are like the big, huge heavy hitters. But yeah, if I haven't made it clear enough now, this album is great. Spine-tingling, crushing, moody, could go on and on. Just fantastic. Next, we have a re-listen. This is Enslaved with ISA. I covered this album last year for my black metal chart. Some people adore this album. Some people find it just okay. It's kind of interesting. I was researching some like lists of enslaved releases, and some people put this towards the top, some people put this more towards the bottom. I remember Sea of Tranquility, I think. Um, I think his name is Pete Pardo, but like I could totally be wrong. They mostly like review progressive rock stuff, but they also review like Immortal and Enslaved, I remember. And those are two very solid bands. And they put ISA at the bottom of their ranking here. And a lot of people put their album that came just before at like their number one spot. But anyways, what do I think of ISA? So this is like another one of their albums that goes way more into the progressive route. I have actually not heard much of their original Viking stuff, and I know that their demo Yggdrasil, which I'm totally going to cover in the future, probably more than once, because in terms of black metal demos, especially from bands that made it big, that is one of like the best demos in the game. Like up there with like Ask, by Burzum, of course. Probably up there with like Emperor's demo, which I actually love that sound. I kind of like it more than their like later stuff, honestly. But Enslaved has a very tumultuous and interesting history, where they started off in Euronymous' label with their weird Viking style on stage with all the armor on, and then they started making like prog, which is super interesting. So yeah, this is prog influenced, and unfortunately, in comparison to their latest album, Utgard, I think this one is a lot more influenced by neo-prog than like the best bands of prog. Like you can tell by some of the vocal harmonies, because there is a lot of clean singing on this album, that it sounds kind of like, gosh, like Blommeljude. I don't really want to say Blommeljude. I freaking hate that band. I'm sorry to say, but like, it's kind of mixed in a way that sounds like that, and I'm just like, it's a little too bright for me, even like a little bit overproduced, which is very unfortunate for black metal. But like these are not that common on the album. There are some traditional prog elements that are amazing, like this really warm sounding mellotron just sends a chill down my spine every time I hear it on this album, and it's just fantastic. A lot of these melodies, especially on the guitar, are just phenomenal. There were 3 tracks on this album that I was super, super into. I think Ascension and Bounded by Allegiance are phenomenal, which they both have these really interesting syncopated rhythm sections, which I think is an element that could be used in black metal a lot more. And the 11-minute long Neogenesis, which is just dominated by this massive guitar line that just solos all the way for like half the song, and it's shocking how much it can hold your attention. So I think ISA is honestly a very good album, and in terms of neo-prog, it's one of the best albums, but in terms of black metal, it's just a good one. And up next is an album loved by many, Purity by Hate Forest. Now I say loved by many because, to be honest, I'm not in love with this album. I gave it a fair shot, and I just texturally, it's not perfect, and it might have been because I had a not very good rip of it. YouTube is so hit or miss with the quality of an album that you can listen to on there. Not in terms of the quality of the release. We all know that. If you follow any YouTube channel that just uploads straight up full-length albums, you know how low quality some of those can be, especially on like Weedian. Sorry, Weedian, but a lot of those albums are pretty bad. But this one, you can't really find it anywhere else because Hate Forest has a lot of controversial influences and topics that they talk about. So you're not going to find them on Spotify or any other place where you can find a high quality recording. You kind of have to take a risk and buy the full length on like vinyl or cassette if that's your speed. And it's ambient style black metal, and this is what some refer to as blasturbation, where it is blast beats the whole time just about, with very little to vary. Or at least that's kind of how I remember it, because the blast beats are very dominating, and it's not even like they have many like drum rolls or just like different like tom fills in between. It's just like whole song, and these are some long songs too. And the issue is they're so dense in the mix that the guitars are just about inaudible, and it's not even like the most raw sound in the world. So like I never understand why like there's lo-fi black metal and then there's raw black metal. I really think that's a distinction people need to make, because just because something's like, it can be somewhat produced and it's lo-fi and it's like, oh, you made it sound like crap like on purpose, and then it comes across as disingenuous, and it's like, why won't you let me listen to the riff? Like I want to hear the riff. Like when I think of like raw black metal, I mean, I mentioned Forest a lot because I own the CD, but that sound is insanely raw. That's like sandpaper to the ears, but like because of the stylistic choices they've made, you can hear everything, and it's all just this really hollow sound, and it sounds great. Here it's way too dense and cacophonous, and it's like, I mean, if you're into like Swedish death metal, then you might get with this sound a bit more, But it's really hard for me to pick out these individual textures here. They're just so densely packed. Of course, this is pretty tense and eerie stuff, and as the name of the band, Hate Forest, implies, it's very hateful. Not towards any group in particular, I don't think, but like you really feel spiteful listening to this thing. And judging kind of by like my headphones here, it sounds like one of those albums that sound better with speakers than like headphones. Kind of like Dark Space 3, but Dark Space 3 even does hold up with headphones because it does have that little bit of ambience, and I know because I've enjoyed that album more in the car than just on my headphones. So I'm going to give this album a good for now, and I really encourage you to take that with a grain of salt and probably check this out for yourself because, one, people seem to adore this album, and two, I probably just had a bad rip of it. Like, there's probably a good one somewhere on the internet. And up next is a blackened speed metal album. This is Butcher with 666 Goats Carry My Chariot. This is an interesting little album here. It has a lot of the cheesiness from some first wave bands like Tormentor, and a lot of the riffing style from like Slayer. And as much as I like struggle to like justify a band sounding like Slayer claiming to be blackened in this day and age, I can kind of throw them a bone because Slayer was very influential on the riffing style and first wave black metal. So it's kind of, it's like fine, I guess. So this is certainly a less atmospheric album. It certainly pulls away a lot of the atmosphere like Black and Roll or Black and Speed tend to do. I think some Black and Roll can be good if the riffs are great. The riffs here are not fantastic. The guitar solos though are pretty solid. They're better than like Kerry King's soloing typically. A lot of people hate his soloing, but I think it fits the sort of feel that they're going for. But the solos here are pretty solid. They're not enough to push this into like great territory, but I think they work. What's funny is like the more clean vocals are actually more black metal feeling than like the harsh thrashy yells. Just an interesting observation there. And the most black metal feeling track here is actually the title track. So if you want to pick one out and feel, I don't know, like if you feel guilty for like not completing Nothing But Black Metal November for some reason, like that's a song you can listen to there. And that one comes with all the cheesy glory of first wave black metal. Not that I don't love first wave black metal. There's a lot of very special albums there for me. But this album overall I think is pretty good. Definitely more friendly upon the ears than a lot of the raw stuff, but like it's just not my taste in particular. Next, back to some eclectic atmospheric black metal. We have Vellus with Night on the Bare Mountain. This has a really interesting tone throughout. All of the drum parts are very varied, which I love raw black metal, and I love when it has variation too. Like you can be repetitive, and a lot of times that's very good for me too. Like Dark Throne, of course, the super repetitive sound, terrible influence because now so many bands pull from it and they're like, oh, what if I did it without the cool riffs? But Vellus is nothing like that. They have very interesting riffs consistently, and the atmosphere is wonderful. There's some acoustic and clean bits on this album that actually sound pretty great, and I can really appreciate them. And if you can't tell, there's actually quite a few comparisons you can have with this and Ulver's debut Bergtot, except this is like more raw. The vocals are very interesting. They kind of remind me of Attila Sihar, if that's how you pronounce the last name. I always just refer to him as Attila, but they're like almost sung, but they still are very growly, which is a super interesting texture here. And I think it works really well for the slightly pagan raw style. And I think that's like the best time to use it. I think we need to incorporate pagan elements more into the raw black metal rather than the cleaner stuff. And it's like, oh, what if I include this cheesy instrumental? Which, I mean, it's your style. If you're a black metal band, like go ahead, do what you want. But like in all honesty, I think that works better raw than it does clean. A lot of these riffs here are simple chord-based riffs, but they all sound awesome. It's like shocking how good these riffs are, despite not being that technical. I think this album's great, honestly. Really good atmospheric black metal, really strong. I have zero issues with it. Up next is Walknut. This is Grave Forests and Their Shadows. A lot of people say this is like the hidden Burzum release. Is it? Gosh, I don't think I would describe it like that, but it certainly feels kind of Burzum-esque. More like Hivisa to Us or like Det Som Ingen Var sort of like style there, with these really drawn out long forest feeling tracks. It feels more influenced by Burzum than actually Burzum. I feel like if Varg had a chance to make like another album like Before Fallen, I guess. I didn't listen to the album Before Fallen, but like it kind of like looks like that approach. And it really sucks you in emotionally. It really keeps your attention like that. And a lot of people compare this to Burzum also because the guitar tone, it's very fuzzy, which I'm a sucker for the fuzzed out black metal style. And funnily enough, the vocals are actually like a slightly harsher version of Varg's Philosopheme vocals, which, I mean, I'm never complaining because that's probably Varg's best vocal performance. And emotionally, this album is just a complete downward spiral. It just gets sadder and sadder until the end. I think this album's great. Really interesting atmospheric black metal release. Is it like cream of the crop atmospheric black metal? Probably not, because that's just such a strong little subgenre there. I mean, you've already got bands that like cross over to DSBM that are really strong there, like Gris or Gree. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's the Canadian band. But this is a great album. I highly recommend it, especially if you're being a completist. Up next, we have kind of a weirdo band pick here. This is the band Anubi, and I'm holding my notes here to make sure I get this name right. Kai Pilnadis Akis Uzmerks Mirtis. I don't know. I think this band's like Lithuanian. A really weirdo pick here, but geez, where do I even start with this thing? This is like, wow. Like, think of like Maudlin of the Well, if instead of like death metal leaning, they were black metal leaning, slightly like bridging the weirdness of first wave with like the tone of second wave. But they also had other friends who like heard they were making a band and they're like, can I join? And they're like, I don't think you'll like it. And they're like, no, I really want to join. Let me play piano. And they're like, yep. And then they made it good. They like, gosh, this is like such an eclectic album. I know I said like Vellus was eclectic, but like this thing is truly bizarre. And it's like some people probably wouldn't even call it black metal because it's just so weird. But gosh, this thing it's terrific, honestly. Like the proggy elements are so fun, and the atmosphere really sinks in. Like if you combine like the weird like delivery of some of like Tormentor, but like you made it work every time. It's like this is what you get here. You also get like a super long dark ambient track to close it off, and it's almost like a neoclassical dark ambient track, or like neoclassical dark wave, I guess. And it's like 15 minutes in length, and it's just I mean, some people might say it's meandering a bit, but I think it's just awesome. The piano work here is actually not like chords that like support everything. It's straight up like a jazz pianist with all these dissonant chords just running all over the thing. It's like, it's very much Halloween music here. Like if you want black metal to be like Halloweeny, this is what you got here. It's almost like, gosh, like if Goblin, who made the Suspiria soundtrack, turned black metal, or more black metal, because they have some black metal like vocals on that album. By the way, check out the Suspiria soundtrack. That is an amazing soundtrack. Also, the bass lines are like highly syncopated, so much so they're actually unnerving. And it's so rare for folky bits, like actual like drawn out folk parts in black metal to be interesting to me. But here, it's actually interesting. They actually kill it. And the clean vocals are just as chilling as the harsh vocals. I don't know how they do it. And also, like, I'm not the best at music theory, but like I could almost feel like prog polyrhythms in here, or just like odd time signatures. I didn't really count it myself as I was like too focused to like the atmosphere of the music, but I was like, wow, this is insane. Overall, very emotionally dynamic album here. Gosh, what can I not say about this album? This album's totally great. I would be so happy if you gave this a listen. Honestly, tell me what you think about it. And up next, we have a recent release. This is Impious Throne with Scourge. I'll be honest, I chose this because of the length of this. It's like 27 minutes in length, very short album. And I was thinking to myself, I'm not going to torture myself with another 40-minute, just atmospheric, like BS black metal album this year. I'm totally done with those. This is the opposite of atmospheric or drawn out. In terms of time wasted, this thing has like 2 minutes of anything slow on this album. All right, like 2 minutes maximum. The rest is probably the most fast black metal I've ever heard. This thing, like these blast beats are like so fast. Like I can't even keep up with them. This makes Dissection look like Sun. Yeah, this is Blackened Speed. Like actually Blackened Speed. Like this is so fast. And it actually helps build atmosphere just on the speed. It makes it dark and claustrophobic. And for the little bits of like acoustic ambient stuff that goes on, which is not much, like the opening track is just 30 seconds long and it's just dark ambient. And the rest is just the fastest BPM. And also some of these riffs have a really hooky nature, which however they squeeze that into this super tight album is insane. And this is honestly surprisingly well-rounded. A lot of the instrumentals are dissonant and a lot of them are very rhythmic. Like, I don't know how they did it with this stupid album. I think this album's kind of stupid, but like, oh my goodness, it's a fun one. It's a cool one. It's, if anything, it is just a marvel in technical speed, just in skill. Like, I know some people are like, oh, I don't like technical black metal. I don't even know if I could call this like technical. It's just like fast black metal. It's so fast. Like, if you could find me a faster black metal album that isn't like artificially sped up, then let me know. Otherwise, listen to this thing. I think it's great, honestly. Is it one note? Totally. The emotional dynamism on this thing is 0, but it starts here, 30 seconds later it's here, and then it's here for the whole rest of the album. And I'm glad it's only 27 minutes because I don't know how long I could sustain myself listening to something like so bizarrely fast, but I enjoyed it. Thought it was great. Hope you guys like it too. And up next, to offset all the NSBM from this chart, we have Dawn Raid with Behold Sedition Plainsong. Now, this is a very heavy black metal sound that's supported by strings, just beautiful arrangements overall. And when I first heard that stuff, I was like, okay, like politically motivated, like agrarian, like lifestyle for the people, folk elements, like Peste Noir. This might honestly just be anti-Peste Noir here. I don't think it's as good as the Peste Noir debut. Like, fight me on that. I think if you don't like Peste Noir's debut, it's like you have a personal issue with it, or you're lying to yourself because it's so good sounding. The whole approach to it is crazy good. It's honestly just a political thing, which then for this album here, you might have an issue with the political thing, which I think in terms of like the approach here, it's so much like for the people and like non-hateful, and it's so much like warlike and like, I don't even know how else to describe it, but like it's very triumphant sounding, like some NSBM, funnily enough. It's like counter NSBM this is actually, which I appreciate more than like bands like Wolves in the Throne Room being like, yeah, we're not NSBM, and they act like they're so interesting, but they just make the most boring atmospheric black metal and call it Cascadian. At least it'd be Walknut, because Walknut's good. This is awesome. And the guitar tone here, I don't remember it exactly, but like I just remember it being pretty interesting. Very solid, and it holds its ground for the whole album. The vocals are very aggressive too and triumphant. Really interesting style there. So yeah, this one's great. If you want to know what NSBM sounds like with clean production, but opposite politics, like listen to Dawn Raid. Well, it's not clean production, but it's like cleaner production. I think this album's great, honestly. Like, I don't like this album cover. I think it's a very ugly and plain album cover, but listen to it. It's good. It's great. Next we have Menace Ruin with Cult of Ruins. Now, I've talked about some weird albums on this chart, and here's another one, because this one is like drone for a good amount of it. It's droney, doomy, and heavy black metal with a ton of thick atmosphere as well. The sonic experimentation here is just nuts, and there's a lot of feedback that just screeches against the harsh vocals, and it's like battling to like remain afloat. And the harsh vocals here are these intense sounding screeches that sound just awesome. And it's super abstract here. Like, every angle you look at this thing is just this perpetual gaze into nothingness. And it's so weird. It's like watching like things fall apart and like civilizations crumble in like sped up time, while just being like a witness to it all. I don't even know how to describe this thing. I'm going to have to re-listen this. And I'm probably going to go through this whole band's discography because it's so interesting sounding here. But if you want like the thickest sounding black metal that's like really drone influenced, like check out Menace Ruin. Up next we have Leper with End Progress. This is ska influenced. The vocals are very much like hardcore punk, kind of emo-y, and they don't work here. They don't at all. The ska guitar lines suck here. They're terrible. they sound awful. Some people on Encyclopedia Metallum rather, were like, wow, this is good because it's not a clone of this other band. They sound different. And I was like, I don't know, maybe they should sound like that band because what they got here is not good. Is it interesting? Yeah, sure. Like, you don't expect it when the ska lines come in, but like it totally breaks away from the emotion, which is so bad because there is some genuinely good stuff on this album. But like once that first ska line hits, you will not be able to focus for the rest of the thing. You just get pulled out so fast. I've never had a more immersion breaking album ever than this right here. I don't even know how it happens. And it's such a shame because they have stuff like these growling thick bass lines that sound amazing. And towards the beginning of this album, you got these really fun, frantic sounding melodies. And the blast beats are crazy fast and the drum part is pretty dynamic overall. But honestly, it just gets tiring so fast. And it's so hard. Like, I've never had an album that I struggled to focus with this much. I don't understand it, man. This is poor. Do I recommend you guys check it out? Actually kind of do. Like maybe had an off day, like a really bad day, but gosh, it's a shame seeing something so interesting sound so terrible. That was probably the most disappointing album on this chart. We got another album coming up, a good one, Ulver with Kveld Singer. This is a part of their black metal trio in the 90s, which then they turned to like dark ambient drone stuff later on, and recently synth pop, which I wasn't huge on Flowers for Evil, but this is part of the black metal trilogy, so I was like, oh, put this in the chart. I remember my reasoning for this one. Unfortunately, this one is not black metal. This is all like acoustic neo-folk. So unfortunately, I have to disqualify it. And even more unfortunately, it's not as interesting or as eclectic as Ulver tends to be, especially on the early black metal stuff. Their black metal stuff is like masterful, and some of their droney stuff is interesting too. So this is very European pagan style, neo-folk, a lot of like long drawn out Viking-esque vocals here. Unfortunately, that is a little generic, and maybe it's just because this album's probably influenced so much, so I'm used to this sound way too often, but it's mostly just fine. This album is at its best when the track throws in another instrument, whether it was like some kind of flute or like a tribal sounding like drum, like floor toms, I think. Unfortunately, being acoustic guitar, it sounds terrible every time it slides, and there are a few songs where you can hear that same leitmotif over and over again, which I'm like, okay, that's the melody, but like the slide is just, it's so bad. And I don't want my acoustic guitar sounding abrasive. Like, you can have like electric guitar with like 6 pedals, just this monstrous, horrendous tone, and I'll be like, cool. But here I'm like, I don't want an acoustic guitar to sound like that to me, if that makes any sense. But I will give it that the vocals are honestly pretty great the whole time. They're normally pretty. And there's a song called just Acapella where it's just sung, and it's actually really pretty. And the last track on here is like 6 minutes long or something like that, and I actually find it rather incredible. It was very appealing. So I'm willing to give this a good. A lot of people love this album, so there's a chance you will too. This is a good album to play for like dinner parties, honestly. Especially with people who are like, hey, put on some music, and you're like, well, let me put you on to Ulver, and they'll be like, oh, it's pleasant folk, and then you hit them with like the black metal stuff later, or like the Sun collab. Or don't. This is a stupid suggestion. Anyways, next we have Book of Black Earth with The Cold Testament. This isn't in the description because this isn't a genre. Blackened metalcore, almost. And the reason I say that is because like you got like the hooky nature of like Inquisition, Immortal, a lot heavier sounding and deeper, and the vocals are a bit more like yelly than typical like black metal vocals, but the instrumentals are typically black metal leaning. They typically sound like black metal, like these tremolo guitar lines, pretty rhythmic, but just the whole thing, it's like a little more, kind of want to say commercial, but it's just heavy here. And gosh, this thing is not cult at all, but I'm not going to disqualify it for a couple reasons. One, it sounds like black metal. It's mostly sounding like black metal. There are some black metal releases with different vocals, so you can't really consider that a huge changing factor here. Two, it's honestly really great. I don't think I've ever had a more hype black metal album I've ever heard. It's just so motivating. Like, I was driving down, like, I want to say the 405 with this thing, and I was like imagining myself holding like a lance outside the car window and just, I don't know, shoving it into some like Dream Theater fan. Dream Theater sucks. And I'm going to stand by that. Dream Theater sucks, dude. I hope Music of Destruction's watching this because I'm sure he knows Dream Theater sucks too. That's like one of those elitist opinions that I'm like totally down with. I'm like, yeah, they're boring. Except John Myung, that bass player is legit. Anyway, this album's furious. It's so crazy. Look at that album cover. You got the wolf there. It's like, if you could ever hear black metal like a football game, it would probably be this. The snare sound is mixed amazingly. It cracks like straight up thunder. Some of the hooks here, I'll be honest, are a bit cringe, but the first song is not cringe at all. It's 6 minutes long. It's called Weight of the World, and that hook is just immense. And like, I was in my car screaming along this thing too, and it was just very satisfying listen here. It's not one that'll like rock your world in a way, like emotionally devastated. It's a rather triumphant and aggressive album, but like I want to call this like blackened metalcore or like blackened Mastodon. It sounds a bit like Mastodon. Some of the guitar lines remind me of one guitar line from Crack the Sky by Mastodon. I want to say like the third track, the solo, that I forget who does it, but it's like this rhythmic solo that's like tremoloed, and I'm like, wow, that's like, I can feel that tinges of that on this album. But yeah, I give this a great. Like, go ahead and listen to it. Like, it's a silly album, but like, it's awesome. It's genuinely so fun. Next, we got to re-listen. This is Decoherence with Ekpyrosis, Music of Distraction. Hope you're watching this. Really do, because I put a song from this on one of your live streams one time, and you denied it because you're like, I don't like clean black metal. But what about cacophonous black metal? You like dark space. This is one of the few spacey black metal releases that can even compete with dark space. And no, it's not like Mare Cognitum, where it's like melodic the whole time. This thing is just dense and destructive sounding. And in terms of re-listens, this is one of those albums that I was like, I know I love it already. So I threw it in because I was like, I don't know how good the ending is going to be here. So I need it to be great. Everything here is drowned in reverb. It's just like the most swarming and cacophonous sound. And the vocals are harsh, yet they feel so helpless by being like drowned out by all this other stuff. It's like someone who's summoning Azathoth, aware that everything's about to be ceased from existence. And judging by that album cover, that's exactly what's happening. And the last two tracks have this really hypnotic feel to them that is really interesting. If you want an album that starts with 0 breaks and it pushes the gas the entire time until it's out of gas and you're dead, Decoherence, Ekpyrosis. They also have other albums people say are amazing too, or they have one other album and a compilation or two. So totally support them. I don't even know what they're doing, but they're amazing. Up next is Studhoff, Towards Thy Astral Path, another victim of YouTube bad rips, because some people say this is good, some people don't. Some people say this is NSBM. I couldn't really tell. I think like the lead singer was like kind of a bad person from what I heard, but the main thing here is it's rather vampiric, and it's kind of mournful and longing vampiric stuff, but also rather mystical and aggressive. It's a really interesting blend of styles, I guess you could say. Unfortunately, it's like insanely compressed and just doesn't sound very good at all. The textures are just unflattering, very flat sounding, not buzzy enough, or big enough, or chuggy enough. Just, honestly, it's just kind of boring. Also, there's an interlude in the middle that is just beyond cringe. Just terrible. It's like clean vocals song. Every clean vocal bit on this album is awful. And there's a lot of symphonic layers to this thing that honestly get annoying. And honestly, if they ditch them, this whole thing would probably sound better. I think it's okay. Some people really like it. I don't really understand that why. I mean, wasn't hating myself, but this is honestly just kind of a boring symphonic black metal album. And up next we have Cobalt with War Metal. This is Blackened Sludge. Gonna say straight up, I'm not in love with this album either, but apparently their whole fan base seems to not even like this album, even though this is like their first like foray into Blackened Sludge. It's mostly black metal leaning, except it's like extra abrasive, I guess you could say. Most of their fans seem to say that their later albums are leagues and leagues ahead of this one, but I don't know why I decided to check on this one. And once you're past the highly abrasive sound, there's really not that much to grip onto. And the sound of the snare is like super upfront and weird sounding. I just think it doesn't sound very good, and it's rather distracting. And you know, I mean, I know I'm ragging on this a lot, but it's not bad by any means, honestly. The sludge influences are minimal, yet very effective, and a lot of the riffs are pretty strong. And I mean the sludge influences are minimal because you have very few chugs or lower parts. They're here, but it's only like once or twice. So there is stuff to appreciate here. Like, honestly, you could probably cherry pick some of the songs and have a pretty solid release here. But as a whole, it's just okay. And up next, we have A Mystery with Grim Satanic Blessing. Now, Encyclopedia Metallum gave me really low hopes for this band. I think I added them because they looked bad, actually. All of their reviews are like super low and just not good. So I was like, hey, let's cover something bad, I guess. This album's actually not that bad. It's really raw and fuzzy, so if nothing else, it at least has that. Funnily enough, one of the songs has the same riff from Transdermal Celebration by Ween, the band Ween, Ocean Man, The Mollusk, Quebec, Chocolate and Cheese, dude, pork roll, egg and cheese. That's a song of theirs, is what I'm referring to. But that threw me for like a loop. I was like, what on earth is this riff? It sounds good. It's rather uplifting for black metal, but I was like, all right. I guess Ween like took that from them, because I think they came after. I don't remember. And this album's certainly derivative. It is as unoriginal can be, but it's not really that bad. Like, if you just want more of the same like stuff that like is typical black metal, like, then sure, give it a shot. And if you like fuzzy raw black metal with some good melodies, you'll probably like this. And there are some clean vocals here that aren't great, but you know, it doesn't really throw me off that hard. This album's good. It's one of those albums that like take it or leave it. It is not better than its contemporaries, but it's of a pretty tried and true method. So yeah, you can listen to it and you might like it. And up next is a demo from Israel. This is Enochian Key, Where Gods Wonder, Where Ravens Fly. This is a demo, so it's low quality. And it's one of those albums that you're like, probably not a lot of influence from other bands at the time. And it's more like word of mouth influences where they're like, whoa, that sounds cool. Maybe some like tape trading influences. I don't know how Israel of all places got into this, but cool. It's like proto DSBM with some symphonic elements. It's certainly a weird mix here. And another weird influences are guitar solos. And it's not like guitar solos going beyond typical black metal ideas. It's guitar metal solos that are like, they're like, oh, let's put in some Led Zeppelin influence, if anything. It's a weird batch of influences here. Most of the vocals are pretty bad here, but they at least vary it up with like death growls and like clean vocals, so I mostly forgive it. And you know, it's hard to explain, but you can tell with this demo that there's a lot of passion behind it. Like, just the way you hear it, it feels very like honest and true. I think this is good. I mean, I don't hate it. It's mostly just fine. A lot of interesting guitar solos. If you want something that's like slightly eclectic, then sure, give this a shot. In terms of an actual music release, is it good? It's probably just okay, but I was just like, wow, go you guys. Meanwhile, up next we have Judas Iscariot with their classic DSBM album, To Embrace the Corpse's Bleeding. So you might say it's not DSBM, but a lot of people kind of consider it DSBM. Also, USBM classic here, one of the few USBM albums probably anyone will consider like true cult, because it is. Like, look at the guy. He's got the very typical corpse paint going on. He's got a raw black metal album here with demo type lengths of tracks here, and it's gripping. The melodies are great, and the emotion sinks in fast. And in a way, it's very standard, but at the same time, it supersedes its contemporaries. There's decent riff variety, a blend of second wave influences that really brings us into another level. It's not as wide and open as most DSBM is, with like more droney sections, but it definitely has a lot of influence from the genre. The guitars have a really dark presence, and they're placed amazingly. Yeah, this is awesome. This is one of the best albums on the chart. This is great. I have no issues with it, and it's just a perfect listen. It's perfect, like 30 something minute listen. Really moody, really emotional. USBM classic, honestly. Like, it's not even one of those USBM records that where people can be like, oh, all USBM is bad, and then you're like, well, what about this? And they're like, you're right. Some people like other Judas Iscariot albums, but I mean, I might check them out in the future, but I've been told this is the classic one, and it sounds like it. And we've reached number 60 with Lamp of Murmur, Submission and Slavery. This is their second full-length album. We've covered both their full lengths in this series. So how does it stack up? Well, it's got the same sort of raw, bleed through, fast sort of textures of their first album, but the tone, you notice, is distinctly washy and warbly. A lot of people say this is post-punk inspired, and you can't even tell, in my opinion, unless you think too much about the guitar tone or wait until the last track, which is a cover of a Christian death song, which is a band, if you didn't know, a goth band. This is the most disappointing album on the chart for me. I was very excited to end this chart with another great album because the first album was astounding, honestly. And a lot of people this year hyped this album up, but I listened to it and I just couldn't get it. It's 5 songs, 2 of which are dark ambient. Well, 5 songs and a cover at the end. And the dark ambient songs are fine, but in the second black metal song and the last black metal song are really pretty solid too. And the longer black metal tracks, honestly, are really weak. The first one is super repetitive, and it has nothing going for it. It's like it pulls you in for a second and then you're done. There's some like thrashy chugs thrown in here that are pretty good, but other than that, not a lot to grip onto. And honestly, like if it wasn't for this first track, this would be a pretty solid like EP. But right now I'm feeling this is just okay, honestly. And honestly, this whole thing just feels half-baked. It feels like they had like 4 good ideas and then they're like, okay, let's make a full length. And it's like, whoa, hold on, you need a full album idea here. You can't just run with this one guitar texture and act like that's gonna uphold the whole thing. And they're like, no, we're Lamp of Murmur, we can do this. But no, they can't, honestly. It's just okay. And I hate to end it with just that streak of good and okay albums and then the Judas Iscariot one and then here. But I guess that's nothing but Black Metal November 2021. Wait, what's that? Oh my god, it's Archgoat and they got a steel chair. Oh my god! I'm not gonna end on a not good album. Archgoat has a new album, and we're reviewing it. They're here. Look at him. He's got the steel chair. He's got the super creepy atmosphere. He's got the killer riffs. It's got the amazing bass work. For war metal, that never happens. It's got the perfect dense cacophonous sound that makes it dark without being so lo-fi you can't hear it. It's got the froggiest, deepest vocals ever. Those aren't even death growls. That's just his voice. Dude, the riff on Rats Pray God? That's awesome. It's like in 10-4, or maybe it's like in 4-4 and then a 2-4 measure, but it sounds awesome. Dude, the title track is so dark. Huge fan of that one. It's great. It's a great album. They did it again. They released the same album, and it's great again. Archgoat does the same album a lot, but you know, war metal wins this year. Oh my god, what's that music? Oh my god, it's the Money in the Bank winner. It's Revivorum Immolockt with their new album, Svagi Doden.
Therefore, this will now be a triple threat match.
A triple threat match? What? What the hell? Cover by Rollins. Rollins with the title. Rollins with the title. Wait a minute. Seth Rollins with the title.
It's quite ironic because Jesus Christ himself, I don't need to point to the manger. Jesus Christ himself is winning nothing but Black Metal November this year. Revivorum Immolockt, Svagi Doden. Some might refer to this as blackened noise, but you know what? This thing is so insane, I'm throwing it in here because it's my list and I don't care. Did you guys review these 2 with me? No, you didn't expect me to say them either. Unless you did, you have to be like psychic or something. But this is cool. Amazing textures. Roman Catholic black metal? Yes, please. Choral vocals. It's insane. Minimal guitar lines, but every time they're here, they sound incredible. This is one of the most bone-chilling albums of the year. And let me tell you, when I made that post-black metal video way back this year, and I was like, oh, this could be post-black metal if we just did the actual definition of what it should be. Nothing could explain that idea better than this album. It combines the lo-fi drumming sound with this more cacophonous style of like production for these huge vocals and these little vocal snippets of like Catholic preachers in Latin. It's utterly terrifying. It's utterly ascendant sounding. When I say this is as avant-garde and it hooks you in, like this feels as innovative and interesting as your Fanisks, as your Murmures, as your Philosophems. This is a pivotal point in black metal is done with this band and this album. Believe me. Canticum Sanctus Sanctus Sanctus, or Sanctus Sanctus Sanctus, has this like horn line, like just this 2-note horn line, which black metal has a lot of like 2-note guitar lines that I've actually shown up on this list a few times where it like hooks you in that way. And it's able to withhold 15 minutes for 7 minutes of like this one horn line that just chugs and chugs and chugs, and it's utterly primal. It's like the very way you should be moving is propelled through this sound. And the entire last track is just bone-chilling cacophony until the last minute it just drones out. Every song on here feels like an opus, just an absolute epic. Like Philosophem, where every song feels like a whole different movement here. And they all stand alone, but as a whole, this whole thing is just momentous and so grand. This takes the mantle of this year's like Mastar and how last year's like Aranzi Pazuzu's Mastar and Kinsey was like the weirdo black metal album that snuck into the top 10 and just, I don't know, in like RKO the number 3 spot from Fiona Apple. Just kidding, she wasn't even gonna get close to the top 10. That album sucks. That's what this is doing, except it's even better than Mastar and Kinsey. I would freaking die for this album. It's so good. Probably best black metal album of 2021. Unless I haven't listened to the Malgoth one yet, but Reverorum and Malakt, they freaking did it. They did it. They're WWE champion. They're nothing but Black Metal November champion. I'm not even going to compare it to like Dark Space 3 or something like that, because it beat Lamp of Murmur, and that's all that matters. All you Lamp of Murmur fans can go suck it. Your music taste is trash. And perfect year. I never DQ'd any album this year. If you think so, you're probably one of those crazy people that believes gaslighting is a thing. Another great year. Another great 60 albums in a row. Not a single bad one. Social media in the description. Like and subscribe. See you for Classics Month. And then top albums of 2021. It's been good. Have a good one. Hope you guys have a good day. Bye.